So let's talk about accessible design elements by separating our space into three zones. And I like to think of them as the high zone, the middle zone, and the low zone. So these are strategies that I use in my own classroom. And we'll start with the high zone. I think a lot of people overlook lighting sources when they try to build a calm learning space. But I think this is one of the biggest factors. Um, if you think of lighting at a rock concert, a big department store, or say a spa, all of those venues have a different purpose. So, which space has lighting that makes you feel the most calm? And how does lighting from your interactive board or window change the atmosphere? So, I know in some classroom spaces, there's not a whole lot of natural light. And at my school now, we actually have classrooms that are in interior halls, which means there is no window or natural light coming in. So some of the teachers have gotten creative with um, lamps that are facing up, screens on the lights that kind of shield some of the brightness away. And again, these are things that we do in my school, and it always depends on what your principal or administration will allow. But those are some things that I see in my school. I always think about my interactive board. I have a Promethean board in my classroom, and it does give off a lot of light. So when I do use my Promethean, which is most of the day, I turn the lights off in the front of my classroom to kind of balance the space a little bit better. Okay, so next okay, so anchor charts near the student's eye level. I think a lot of teachers like to put them up high because that's a good visual space for everyone to be able to just look up. But if you think about students who, just need it up close to them and the space is not accessible for them to go up to, it becomes a real problem. So we want to think about whether the information is in a space that requires them to move from their workspace, and how accessible is the information we want our students to use. So a small change that I've made is to have letter-sized copies of word walls and anchor charts in plastic sleeves in a binder at each workstation. So that means that all students will have a copy of our word wall, our second grade word wall, and any kind of anchor chart for math or reading or writing right in front of them. This also works well for students with vision needs, and it keeps the students focused in their own area. That means that instead of going to a wall to visit the word wall, getting out of their area, they have it right there, which helps keep them focused. And last in the high zone, we want to add displays for visual interest that aren't overwhelming. So consider choosing colors and patterns that are fun but are not overwhelming the space. And I know as teachers, we take a lot of time and energy to design the perfect classroom. I try to use colors that are already in the classroom. So for example, my last classroom had navy blue cabinets and shelves. So I used navy blue with pale yellow for bulletin boards and decorations. My current classroom has sky blue cabinets and shelves, so I use a light sky turquoise or light turquoise with red accents. So I'm using the colors that are already in that space. So let's talk about the middle zone. Because these are suggestions that I use in my own classroom, you may need to get creative with the furniture you have in your own space. First, try to minimize the travel distances with an open floor plan. And save room for that cozy corner that we'll talk about a little bit later. But consider having tables with adjusted height to fit wheelchairs and other types of seats that you use. This will make it more comfortable for your students to have their workspace. And last, make sure your students can access all of the areas that are open for learning. So your students should have access to the entire room and not just a corner. So there are so many times as a learner that I go into a space for professional development and I'm trapped by the door. And that usually means that I have about 6 square feet of space to move. I can't access the charts that are hung high on the walls on the other side of the room, or excuse me, the rich conversations that often happen um, in the middle of the room. And when this happens, a learner can become disengaged very quickly. So we want to open our space to ensure collaboration with peers. Finally, let's talk about the low zone. In terms of physical accessibility, you might think of these ideas first. Make sure you have wide pathways and clear doorways with a designated space for large supplies and backpacks. Have labeled bins for student supplies. You might choose different colors or different bins, um, which helps for different like quick organization or just ease of understanding where things are. This also is helpful for students with vision needs. Something you might consider is having section bins also in each workspace to hold extra supplies like erasers and sharpened pencils. This allows students again to stay right at their workspace, which helps them stay on task. Finally, make sure your electrical cords and area rugs and carpets are secure. I can't tell you how many times I've been in a classroom or a workspace that wasn't my own, and the rug has buckled under my wheelchair, so then I'm stuck, and there's no other way to go but mess up the rug even more. So in areas where we know there are it's a high traffic area, make sure that we have our rugs with a non-slip pad or I don't know what those are called, just the pad under the rug. I know some teachers also use binder clips to connect their cords together, and that helps to eliminate the tripping. So here is our chart all together. And I'd love to learn strategies from you too. So if you have suggestions, please write them in the chat. I'd love to learn what you've seen in classrooms. If there's anything I can add to my chart or something that I can add to my own classroom space to make it more accessible that you've seen, please let me know. Or is there anything that you that I mentioned that is something that you think is not a good idea? I would also love love to be corrected here. Okay. Okay, so we'll go. Oh. Love the idea of the binder on the table of charts. I think teachers want to leave them all on the wall. Mm-hmm. I think we're often, I don't want to say stuck in our ways, but that's the easiest thing to do is just to hang one anchor chart on the wall or one word wall on the wall. And that is where the students will go to find the information. But I think if we shift our thinking and kind of understand what that means in terms of accessibility for all of our learners, they might have a different mindset. Making sure items are not being used or stored elsewhere to declutter the room. We'll talk about that a little later. Perhaps it can be rotated. Definitely love the idea of flexible seating. Yeah, okay. Thank you for that feedback. On the next slide is an image of my own classroom space. What accessible design features do you notice? Or if you've seen accessible design elements in another classroom, please use the chat to share your thoughts. It's so spacious. Tables allow for flexible seating, lots of space between tables, adjustable height tables and chairs. Yeah. Everything out of the way, on top or tucked in. So I had to change my classroom a little bit because, of course, because I use a wheelchair and I needed to be able to access all of the areas of the room. So my administration advocated for me to have tables instead of individual desks, which works out really well. And it worked out so well that I think my principal looked at my classroom space and decided that everybody in the school should have tables. So all of the teachers in our school who wanted tables instead of desks got tables, which was great because then I could go into everybody's classroom. It's clear where to go and look in the room for educational info. Hadn't thought about the color schemes before, but that is really helpful. Calm color choice. If you can't tell already, turquoise and red are my favorite colors. So some of the things you might not be able to see, I do have labeled bins, tables with various heights and unobstructed pathways. And I also, like we mentioned, chose colors that complemented the room because I had built-in cabinets and wall shelves.